system. So at this point now, we're going to start wiring up our layout, and we're going to start off with the transformer because this is where it all begins. This is a 275 watt ZW transformer that I'm currently working on, and we can tell by the insides here that the coil pack sits right here in the middle, but we also have our 4 rollers exposed, and these rollers will sit on the secondary coil of the coil pack. So here we have our A, we have our B throttle, we have our C throttle and D throttle, and these corresponding outputs would relate to the bottom of these terminals on the ZW, while the upper portion here is labeled as U as common. Now, why we have this labeled as U as common, because if we flip this around and we look on the inside of this, there is a brass plate that connects all of these together. So in reality, you don't need to run 8 wires out to your tracks and accessories. You could do that with only 1 wire because all of these are connected together. So in reality, I could see running 5 wires out of this. We use a 3-rail track for our trains, and whichever brand of track that you decide to use, one of these outside rails is going to get tied to the common side of our transformer, while the middle rail is going to get tied to the throttle or dial of our transformer for power adjustment to run our trains. Now, these tracks have metal ties on them, which helps the electrical connection on these outside rails, but there is a paper insulator on the middle rail to isolate it from the metal ties, otherwise there will be a short in the system. Now, there are other brands of track that use plastic or wooden ties, and that will insulate all the rails from each other during the train's operation. And the only way that you can get a common connection on the other side of a track like that is with our rolling stock and locomotives, because they have metal wheels and axles. So for these tracks that we have here, to get these guys powered up, I mean, I like to solder the wires onto these, but you can use a CTC lock-on clip, and these are very easy to use and install, so you could put them anywhere on the track, and we will just place the clip up against the outside rail and then push the clip up in the middle, and that will hold it in place. So our common wire is going to get tied into this side of the terminal clip because it's going to give common power here, and the power wire is going to get tied into this terminal, which will send power underneath the insulation material, which will send power through the clip to the middle track as shown here. If you do plan to use a CTC clip on your tracks, you may instinctively want to run your wires in this direction just because it's neater and that your wires are flowing towards the clip in this fashion. The problem with this is if you strip off too much insulation, and if these terminals become loose over time just because they are getting used a lot, these wires can pull back and they can short out on 2 of these terminals. So this is where an electrical problem can happen, and therefore you may spend a while trying to figure out, hey, are my trains derailed, or is there something on the track? But clearly the problem can be presented right here, where you could almost see these wires touching each other. So what I would recommend is to run the wires in the same direction towards your CTC clip, but instead have 1 wire go into the terminal this way and then bring the other wire around into the terminal this way. So this way that if you ever pull on the wire or make any adjustments, or if the wire gets kicked accidentally, if you're running your trains on the floor, that these wires are not going to touch each other in any way, fashion, creating a short. Now let's just say that we have 3 rail lines running above our heads and our wires are poking down through our table. These white wires, which are going to one of our outside rails, are going to get tied to the common side of our transformer, while we're going to run a separate wire for each of these color wires to power up our tracks. Now, I know copper wire is expensive nowadays, but if you could find a copper wire with a lower voltage rating, you can save a lot of money. The wire that I have poking down here, I got at Home Depot. It's Southwire brand primary wire, and this 60 volt rated wire, which is 25 feet long, I got for $8 at Home Depot. So it's not a bad price. I've seen this in 14 gauge and 12 gauge wires, so right there, you're saving a lot of money on wire. Speaker wire, as long as it's, copper and everything, I think it should be good to go as long as it's the right amp rating. Now, I would avoid any other wires that have other metal alloys in it, like copper clad or anything that might have tin inside of it, because those wires can potentially rob your train of its performance, and these wires can heat up, as I've spoken with one YouTuber about this, and once they changed everything over the copper, their trains were running better. We're going to run our bus wire, but plan your route, because this way may make running your wires a lot easier. We're going to install these electrical 1-inch 90-degree PVC elbows on our train table frame, and we're going to secure them at each end with a 2-hole 1-inch PVC strap using number 10 by 1/2 inch long screws. Now, these elbows already come with a molded coupling on them, so you could easily couple your pipes together when you are doing underground electrical work, but it's best if you want to cut these off, because you want these conduits to sit flush on your train table frame, and keeping them on is just going to bulge it out, and it's not going to make the straps sit right. Now, you can get these at an electrical supply house without the couplings, and this is just what one of them looks like. But these guys I got at Home Depot. They do have the couplings on them, so again, it's best that you always want to cut them off to have a nice flush fit around your train table. Now, this one here I know is kind of a bit wonky because it is anchored downward, but this is just for the demonstration when I pull wire around the layout, and you may notice that there is a screw on the top. This is something I would never ever recommend anybody to do, because the tip of this screw is penetrating into the conduit, and if you pull wires through this, there's a chance the wires can skin through the screw and cause electrical shorts around your layout, which you don't want to have. Also, remember that the larger the conduit body, the easier it is to pull wires around the layout. As we go down the table, we're going to add another 2-hole electrical PVC strap shown here, and this one is only a 1/2 inch 2-hole PVC strap, because we are only going to support some wires on this. And when we continue down the table to the next corner, we're going to see that we have another electrical 1-inch PVC elbow here, secured in place with another security strap right before our terminal block that goes to our transformer. This 90-degree elbow does not help us here with the wiring of this layout, as some of these tracks may have feeders coming up from the bus wiring to help power up certain sections of this track, and they could be anywhere over here. So even taking this 90 and putting it in the middle, it doesn't help much, because, you know, running longer wire over to the main bus feeder, I mean, it can be done, but they do make these in different angles. So they do make them in 45, 30, and 22.5-degree angles. And let's say for this section here, if I have splices in these tracks that I want to connect up to a bus wire in this section, we can do a 45-degree angle here, leave an open space, and then make another 45-degree angle up over there to help with our bus wire pull around this area of the layout. The bus wire that I'll be using in my demonstration is this number 12 stranded THHN wire. It is 600 volt rated on 500-foot reels, 20 amp circuit, 16 amps sustained copper wire, and this is the wire that I use in my commercial and industrial projects. Now, this wire is very expensive at over $330 for a 500-foot reel. And again, if you could find this in a 60 volt rating at 100 or 250 feet, you can save a lot of money. To help distribute the wire in this demonstration, we're going to use these racketeers. I have my 4 racketeers set up close to my transformer area, and my 4 wire reels are supported using a 5/8 threaded rod. Now, in case if you don't want to use racketeers because you may have no use for them or they're too expensive, you could always use a 4-foot A-frame ladder to support your wires. Now, we can tell at this height that these wires are just perfect, and they're sitting just underneath my train table frame. And all you have to do is just make up a head using electrical tape on your wires, and then you could pull these right underneath your train table frame. And it probably helped make it easier if you want to angle this whole assembly towards underneath your table, so that it'd be easier to pull the wires straight off underneath your table. But since we're not going to be pulling these wires underneath this table, we're going to be using my demonstration piece on the ceiling. The first thing that we're going to do is run all of our bus wires into the bottom part of this terminal strip. Now, I have the wires in the screw terminals just hand tight right now. They're only just snug in place so that they don't pull out. And we could also see here that I have these cut jumpers in here to help distribute power in certain parts of the block. So again, plan accordingly to see how much of these blocks that you will need to power up for your layouts. So we're also going to run 12 gauge wire up from the top of the terminal strip to our ZW transformer, and I'm going to set it up in this fashion. The black wire is going to throttle A, red is going to throttle B. We're going to leave throttle C open, blue will go to throttle D, and of course our common section will go to the common area, common terminals of our ZW transformer. Now if you do plan to use the C throttle as an accessory, I recommend using a smaller wire for your accessories, or if you want to, just stick with the same 12 gauge wire for your or whatever bus wire that you are using, and run a different color down out to your accessory. But I also highly recommend to run a separate white wire coming from the common side of this out to your accessories. This way you don't have to tap into the common side for your bus wire onto your tracks, and it would make it a lot easier to hook up your accessories that way, and of course for possible troubleshooting in case if you ever have to do that in the future. Now once you have your wires here all dressed up, we're going to take a zip tie and we're going to tie it on to our supporting strap. But if you do cut off this remaining piece tail on here, of course you can get it as close as you can onto the head of the zip tie, but it does leave these sharp corners on here, so in case if you ever do pull wires underneath here, these corners here will grab you and they can scrape your skin, leaving for a nice scratch mark on your hand or on your arm. So what I do in the trade, and I've done this a lot on cable trays, we could take our linemans, put it on the remaining part of the strap that's hanging out, and just twist this off. And what it'll do is it'll just break right off, and this will make it so much smoother. Of course it's still rough, but it just makes it a lot smoother of a surface, so that you'll never ever scratch your hand on this or your arm. Now let's move down to our first splice point. So this is where I'm going to show you how to use wire nuts, but the first thing that we're going to have to do is support our bus wire underneath our train table plywood. Now in case if you don't have plywood as a train table base and you have foam and you have a matrix frame supporting the foam, you can go out and get a piece of garbage plywood or 1/4 inch Luan and anchor it underneath your framework in support of your wires and your conduits using the method that I will show you here. So to support our bus wires, I'm going back about a few inches, possibly about 3 inches back from my track feeder wires, and I'm going to use this 2-hole 1/2 inch electrical PVC strap. And to anchor it, we're going to use this number 10 by 1/2 inch long sheet metal screw. So we're going to take the strap, put it over our wires, and we're going to take the screw and anchor it in place underneath our table. Now we see I didn't use a lot of pressure on this, and that I just want to kiss the screw up to the strap, and that because the strap is an 1/8 inch thick, the 1/2 inch screws will never penetrate through to the plywood into your layouts. So we'll take our second screw and we're going to make this a nice, firm, solid anchor for these wires to sit on. And again, using the same method to support the bus wires, you can take the appropriate strap for your conduits and anchor these right to the bottom of your plywood on wherever your tracks are laid out on your layout. The brand of wire nuts that I use in the trade is a 3M brand wire nuts. These are the best wire nuts I have ever used, and I think that they are the industry standard, but I could be wrong, but I've had the best luck with these wire nuts. Now, when you choose your wire nuts, you're going to want to look on the back of your container or the bag or whichever that you prefer to buy. And there's going to be a chart on here on the wire combination that you want to splice together and the size wire nut that you should be using. So here we have the orange, grays, reds, and blues. And again, choose the wire combination for the right wire nut. Now, as a personal preference for me and my experience, I would stay away from the extreme edges because at times I've had wire nuts that did not grab in these areas, but they do grab extremely well in the middle of the chart when I splice wires together. Now, there is a wire nut that I have used back in 2014 because my boss was so cheap, and he only got us these, and these are the B-cap red wire nuts. This one here has some ribbing on the side of it, but the ones that we got were all smooth, and these guys were just pure garbage. They would not grab the wire, they wouldn't grab the copper, they just wouldn't grab anything at all. And when we requested to get the 3Ms, he told them, nope, I'm not getting them. So this is the wire nut you want to stay away from, and these are the wire nuts potentially that people have had bad luck with, saying that they are not reliable. So opt up the few more dollars to get the 3M brand better wire nuts, because these guys will not hold. So to help out with this demonstration, I just took my track feeder wires and I just kind of pulled them above the plywood right now, just to show you what's going on with these wires. So the first thing we're to do is we're going to pull some access wire. The wire that's going to our terminal block, we're going to tie this to the side of our 1/2-inch strap. And the wire that's coming from our wire reel, we're going to pull this a little slack out, leaving about 6 to 8 inches of wire past the strap, and we're going to tie wrap this wire to the side of our 2-hole strap. Don't forget, get rid of these tie wrap tails. And if you want to, while you are in the area, you could always take a tie wrap and dress up the wires, and this is optional if you want to do this. So how do I know if I have 6 inches of wire sticking out here? Well, take the back of your hand, put it up against the strap, grab the wire, and the edge of your thumb here should be 6 inches from back of your hand to your thumb. This way we know we have plenty of wire to play with. We're going to cut our wires right in the middle. So I tied my black, red, and blue wires onto the bus wires just to pull these away to give a better demonstration on how to tie these up. So we're going to first work with our white wires, and we're going to pull down all my track feeder white wires, and we're going to start splicing these up. So we're going to take our white wires, I'm going to push them to the corner of the strap and get my white wires together. And again, we're going to do rule of thumb, and we're going to cut them all straight across here. Then I'm going to use my strippers and strip off an inch or so of insulation off the wire. We're going to take our wires, we're going to bundle them together, keeping the stripped edges close together. And I like to give them just a little twist to start. Then I'll take my lineman pliers and we're going to twist them all together. Now this is a splice that is guaranteed to connect. We have a little feathered head on here, and all the wires are not going to line up evenly when you are twisting them together. So we're going to take our alignments and we're going to cut off about 1/4 inch off the head. I'm going to dress it up just a little bit. Then we're going to take our wire nut, twist that baby on there. Twist the wires too a little bit at it. And there you go. One perfectly spliced wire. Okay, so I know that you ran a lot of wire and you have a lot of splices that go underneath your table, and you're probably thinking, this is going to take forever. Now they do make attachments for your drill to strip the wire, to twist the wire, and to install wire nuts on your wire. And tools like this will make the job go so much faster and easier. Now some of you may want to save time just by stripping the insulation off the wire, putting all of your wires together, and installing the wire nut. The problem with this is that this is a setup for a bag connection. And how that happens is that the spring inside of the wire nut is tapered, so it's going to grab the wires, but as you install this, it can push one of the conductors out of the wire nut, reducing power or giving no power to that section of your layout. So that's why we twist our wires together, and the wire nut is only there just to hold the splice together. You designed your layout and now you're building it in your garage, basement, or some random area in the house. And then you see while you're building, I have an area of interest, whether I can add a siding, a yard, or extend the lines around that cubby area or your area of interest. So what I would suggest is running a separate bus wire from your transformer area up to the area of interest and leave it coiled up. Or if you plan to use your existing bus wires, you can always leave like a 1 or 2 foot loop and then just tie wrap it right up to an existing support strap that you already ran, or add a support strap and tie wrap the wire right to it. So this way you are prepped up in the future for that area. After you're done splicing your track wires to your bus wire, bring your bus wire back to your terminal block. And last but not least, we do have accessories that use fine wire to make them operate or light up. Now this K-line lamppost uses a 24 or 26 gauge stranded wire, and we could tell that these fibers, these fine wires on here, are very small, and if you try to wire nut these onto a bus wire, it's possible that these strands can break off. So I want to show you a trick how to take care of that and make sure that your accessory will always guarantee to operate. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to even out our wires towards the ends, and we're going to cut off 1 inch on one of the wires. Restrip the end. I've cut 2 lengths of 24 or 26 gauge phone wire, about a foot or 18 inches in length. We're going to solder the phone wire onto our accessory wire. After soldering, I'm going to take my stranded wire here in my left hand. I'm going to keep it straight, and I'm going to fold over my solid wire at an angle like this. And the reason is so that we don't put any stress points on the stranded wire of the accessory. Then we apply our heat shrink tubing. And now we have an accessory with extended wires. Now the reason why I said that we're going to offset our cuts on the accessory wire is because that when you drill your hole through your train table board, that when you push these wires into the hole, that the splices now will not need as big as a hole as you normally would if you were to take these and put them side by side to each other. Because if you do this, you will need to drill a larger hole through your table just to get these wires through. Now, of course, you could always try and stagger them as you try and push them in, but just as a personal choice, if you stagger them before you put them in by cutting these wires, this would make installation a lot more easier to push these wires through your table. Okay. Now we have our accessory mounted on top of our table, and its wires are coming through the table, which are ready to get hooked up to our accessory bus wires. Now some would say, why not just take these wires and connect them right to our bus wires? And here are the reasons why. I'll explain why you can't do that and why we have these our telephone wires attached to our accessory wire. The first off is that these green wires are very small, they're very fragile, and even if you pinch them anywhere and if you pull on them, the copper inside can break, or the wire can break off entirely, making the lamp not work, or you're going to have to do a small repair down here. Also, the copper strands inside of these green wires is very small, very fragile, and even if you were to take this wire here, strip it, and then wire nut it to one of our bus wires, the wire nut can break the copper strands in this wire, making the lamp not work. Some would say, well, why not just take some solder and connect it here and then connect it to our bus wire? You can do that, but these wires here will produce a tension on this green wire, which can be transferred to the socket inside the lamp, breaking the wire off on the lamp, making the lamp not work, which would need to be repaired. So why we have these wires is so that we can have extra play with this when we connect them and reduce the tension on our accessory wire. So the first thing you're going to want to do is take your accessory bus wire and run it close to your accessories as possible. Now, if you have to make these guys longer, you can make them as long as you want. So here we're going to have one of our wires. We're going to wrap it around our white wire here. And it's an AC system, so it does not matter what wire that you go onto. But if you are using a DC system, make sure that you have your polarities correct. And we're going to take an orange and blue wire nut, and we're going to tie our wires together. And then we're going to take our blue wire, connect it onto our black wire, and we're going to wrap that around. And again, we're going to take an orange and a blue wire nut and connect it like so. Okay, now we are all connected, and there was minimal stress put on these green wires. Now, of course, we have all of this slack hanging underneath here, so we are going to clean it up using a couple of small tie wraps. So we're going to take our spliced bus wires here. We're going to tie this up right here just to neaten them up. And we're going to take another tie wrap, and we're going to tie it up here onto the main bus wire. And of course, we can see that it instantly neatens things up so that the wires are held close up to our table, reducing any kind of snag if we have to do any other wiring underneath our table. Now, of course, we have this loop over here, which may put some tension on these green wires. So we're going to take these wires and just kind of fold them forward a bit, reducing that tension, having a relaxed wire going to our accessory. Having a properly electrically ran and electrically supported model railway can ensure years that your model trains will run flawlessly without issues. Now, after working in a place like this all day, I don't want to go underneath my table and troubleshoot wiring unless I'm going to be running new wires for new accessories and tracks. So everybody, I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.